I want to talk about another quite powerful space, which was the intergender anger space. And I have been to a few anger spaces before, and gender has always had to play a strong role in them. And I don't mean that for me personally, although it is also true for me personally. I mean that in the sense that the organizers of anger spaces have noticed that there is often a gendered component to anger, that we are angry as men or as women at men or at women. And I don't mean just cross gender, I mean also to the same gender. Both are absolutely true. But it's
Yeah,
often,
yeah,
absolutely, yeah. But it is often a gendered thing, like it feels gendered, and it is about not people as people, but it's about men as men and women as women. Um, yeah, I I've been to two, so I've been to two anger spaces before. One of them was uh, an incredible space for me personally, um, because um, I mean I've written the 300 Ways piece series of pieces, and that there was the first time that I was ever let myself speak out any kind of negativity around women, which up until then it felt extremely taboo, you know, like the moment you say something slightly bad about women, you're sexist, you're misogynist, like this sort of thing. Like I really kind of grew up in that kind of environment and had to really internalize that that was how all people would view me, men and women. So for me, it felt extremely vulnerable at that time, 3.5 years ago, to express that, like, no, I'm mad at women for some things. Um, and it came out as like not necessarily as anger at that point, but more like a grief. It's just like, oh, you've hurt me, you know. And I was able to talk about that for the first time in my life there. I hadn't even been able to write about it until then, you know. It felt really locked up in me beforehand. And there I could let it out. And I was met in it organically by something like 7 of the women who were there who heard me and basically, it resonated with them to stand up for me, to support me, to be there for me, to receive me, to witness me. Um, and that just meant the world to me at the time. Like I felt so afraid beforehand. And to instead be met with not judgment, but with love and deep care and a genuine sense of I see you and I see that your pain is yours and does not make you a woman hater or anything. Um, yeah, that just meant a lot to me that it might be safe to express those things. And I mean, it directly led to me feeling open to write about all of these things like a year later or 2 years later, I think. Um, and eventually, to work through a lot of that stuff, which would not have been possible without that sort of space. Um, so that was a very powerful event for me 3.5 years ago. And but that was kind of the space that I created and took within that workshop. There was also a gendered component to those early two spaces where the men and the women would shout out, roar out, cry out their anger at each other and themselves. And this was already quite intense, but not super powerful. The anger space at this retreat now, from a month ago, was that powerful. It was on the third or fourth day when we'd already met each other, known each other, moved through a lot of stuff, gotten into our own bodies, into our own nervous systems, our own emotional systems, connected with a lot of those parts of ourselves. And then, connected also with the ability to be in our fire, to be activated, to feel safe in that energy. And then it was time to really connect that energy to what are the things that have the ways that we've been hurt, the ways that we've suffered, you know, and finally to express that out. Um, And this was incredibly intense. What happened was we all formed gendered nervous systems, so to speak, with each other, so that none of us would have to bear it alone, the anger from the other group. We all kind of bore it as a group and could let it move through the group as a whole. We stood opposite each other, the genders, and one by one, people could come into the space between us and face either of those groups and scream out, roar out, cry out, whatever it was that they needed to say. Um, and um, I mean, I like to think that that I have ways that gender anger resonates with me, but honestly, like even for as much as I've written about this and felt about this, my own story was not even all of as intense as the stories of so many other people, women and men. Just the anger that they bore towards each other and towards their own sex was incredibly intense. I've never seen anything like it. I've never known that people just walk around with this stuff, people who I met and talked to, and we had seemed perfectly fine. And then they had all of this in there. Um, it was really intense. And like obviously, like whenever someone named something or voiced something or moved something out, especially if it was from your own gender, so to speak. Although not especially, it really depends on who you are, I guess. But like you resonated with it yourself, and the words that they speak are your words too. We all are angry about the exact same things to varying degrees. Um, so there's a picture of this that is confidential that I can't show or share in any format, but it really shows the energy in the space. Like there was one woman in front who was like screaming, crying out, like with incredibly intense expression, mouth wide open, tears down her face. And then there were the women holding each other, like within that sort of nervous system strength, but also shaking, crying, just really alive with that emotion. Just like a strong, just like the shaking of like, oh fuck, like this is really fucking hurtful. And shaking with that. Um, and just really feeling pain after pain after pain from so many people, and resonating with all of it and being like, yes, that's there too, and yes, that's there too. Um, just really intense. There was one woman, for instance, who I think it was her father that she talked about, who basically she said like you tried to kill my mother, and then that's already, she screamed that into the space, like how fucking dare you tried to kill her. And then my mother put that fear in me, and I put it into my daughter, and then you raped her. And there's just this strong grief, this unimaginable grief about that feels like, how could a person hold this, like for a man to have done such deep damage in a woman's life, intergenerational to her own daughter even. Like, what do you do with that? Um, and for her too, there was just like this strength, this power in that grief of like, there's no expectation that it would be bearable in any way, that it could ever be healed, but just and being able to express that into the space was. something that really, really hit me.
That hits me really hard too.
Yeah, yeah. And it's both so honoring to see that in a person, to really see someone so emotionally nakedly, to know like you've dealt with this. Like there's no minute of your life that you don't interact with this pain in some way. Um, and to get to see them in such an honest way, like people can talk about that, they can even cry about it, but to see it in this anger and this grief and this screaming, it's an entirely different kind of experience. And then you see it over and over, the echoes of this, other things, things that men have done, things that women have done. For men, it was often the ways that women have refused to show up, the ways that they, let themselves be weak and didn't take responsibility for their own feelings. Or, for instance, the woman who I mentioned who had been mutilated by her aunt, she expressed that here again, like, how could you fucking do that to me? How weak. How come you didn't stand up for me? How come you didn't stand up for yourself? And a man you know, who had given so much to women, all the adoration, all the gifts, all of the space, all the masculinity, and still they wanted more. They just weren't satisfied and they cheated on him. And all of these things, Um, yeah, so from both sides, it was just very strong. And also men to men, like one man who was like I really I need your support as brothers, and I don't need it. I need it here in this space, but I also need it outside of this. I need it in the world. I need men to empower one another. I need men to hold space for one another. I need men to accept each other in their weaknesses. I need men to teach one another rather than to just be in this competitiveness the whole time. Um, so just really a lot of people speaking from their truth and from their power and from their pain in an authenticity that I've never seen. And I've been to a lot of authenticity spaces, Mary. Like I've been to dozens of circles. I've been to authentic relating works. I've been to Easter. I've been to so many things, and it's never been as strong as it was here. Um, Even in explicit anger, gendered anger spaces. Like this is really something unique. Yeah.
Was there a was there a sense of like moving through it? Was there a I want there to be a happy ending. I just can't just heal it all. But I guess I'm wondering if there was like a something that happened afterward in the activity that
Yes.
helped carry people through somewhat.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. This space went on for I don't know how long, quite long. Um, um, yeah, and of course it's like, each of these people went onto the mat. It's like just a hammer onto your heart, right? And it's just a lot for people for sure. So afterwards we did do a kind of a witnessing and embracing ritual of singing and telling each other what was it again? I don't recall the exact words. Some sentiment of like, I see you. I'm sorry. Thank you. I love you, as a kind of mantra. to help people slowly calm down again. And because this is some one thing, like this is a lot of strong emotions and powerful negative triggering emotions that cause people to shake and be triggered with their own pain and need to express that out. And it's really intense for your nervous system, for everyone involved, for the whole space. Yeah, how do you hold that space well? And what I find is that indeed, like, this wasn't the case for exactly everyone. I know of one person who wasn't able to kind of get out of this and who remained with that pain throughout the rest of the retreat. And I mean, the normal, like, you'd hope that in this sort of case, you'd bring that up to be dealt with later. In this case, this man kept it to himself for nearly the entire duration, which is too bad. But I think for most people, I would say it went quite well. And that's what surprises me, is that there's some sense of like, you can let these strong emotions move through your body. You can shake them out. You can let them live inside of you, but not hold on to them. You can just let them move through so that afterwards you can recover back to normal within not so much time, even. Like that closing ritual was maybe like 20, 25 minutes, and then you're back to normal and you're fine. Yeah, which is surprising. And I imagine there's a lot of nuances in how the space was held and then how it was closed that I maybe didn't pick up on. But yeah, this sort of thing can be led well and can be led in a rejuvenating manner.
That's so amazing. And it definitely, like, I can understand people being triggered. I'm feeling a little like there are aspects of that that resonate for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
If you want, we can take like a moment to like shake with it or something.
Sure.
It is intense for sure. Yeah, is there anything you would like or need right now?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Is there anything that you would like or need right now to loosen up that energy a little bit?
Oh, I don't know. I guess
Or if you
the
like to play with it.
the I guess the kind of juxtaposition of like the woman with the father who tried to kill her mother and then he raped her daughter,
Yeah.
and also the woman who with the mutilation, like I guess the combination of those things sort of like, I don't know, brought up some of my family's intergenerational trauma. There were some parallels in there, and yeah, there's so much intensity, and like the weight of the intergenerationalness like is so heavy, and it's something that I've been working with myself lately, like trying to let go of some of that, heal some of it, like forgive things, and like not pass it on to my kid, but also like accept the things that I can't stop. And it's it's a lot of heavy stuff to work through, and I'm so, I don't know, kind of envious of this group situation, that that stuff can be healed in a group. Like it's not, I don't know. I guess I do my healing alone mostly.
Yeah.
So like the idea that there's like a group, like groups out there that do this is I don't know, makes me kind of hopeful, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you for giving me that space.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I feel you. It's fucking hard. Yeah. Sending you a hug.
Thank you.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. There are spaces like this out there. Um, Definitely people are doing this. I don't know what your financial situation is like, but theoretically possible.
It's not great, but I'll definitely keep it in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, most of all, I also want to say like it is I mean it's possible on the group level, it's possible on the practical level, but it's also possible on the people level, the interpersonal level. Like this is a really important part of what it means to be human. And so many people are going around with these things. And it is possible to create these contexts where that can be expressed. And I also want to really learn for myself, like how might I create a context where these sorts of things can come up in like a safe way or a way that feels right, even when it feels unsafe, you know? Because it will often feel unsafe for people. Like it's vulnerable, it's scary, it's so deep to who you are as a person, you know? But at the very least, it can feel like that and it can feel right. But yeah, people want this. People need this. Um, you're definitely not alone in that. I can tell you.
Yeah. And like I try to like part of my connecting to my own humanity is like trying to be a person on an individual level that can be with people as they're healing and stuff like that. And that's something that I want to do personally, but the idea of an entire group is like
Yeah.
mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a qualitatively different experience,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, like being received by one person is very different from seeing that the group receives your pain, witnesses it, honors it, really hears you. It's 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 really something. Yeah. So too bad for me that it didn't happen for me because in this gendered anger space, um, we were basically given the freedom to like decide for ourselves when we would step onto the mat. And like sometimes there would be space exclusively for women, and then there would be space exclusively for the men, and then we'd switch it around. And I, for me, a lot of things came up because I have a lot of stuff around this. You know, I was able to write like almost 400 of these things. So, um, so each time I was sort of like half, like I was already shaking with emotion, but then also like, what do I want to bring to the mat? And also like, oh, this is my moment. Like this is really for me. And but also feeling like, you know, like it's scary, and also kind of whenever I saw like an opportunity, like someone else had already taken the space and it was quite powerful, or I needed to recover still from what had just been said, and in the time that it took me to recover, someone else had already taken the space. You know, all of this stuff. So this anger space ended without me getting into the mat. I think in total we were in total like 35 people or something, participants, and I think in total maybe 4 people, 5 people didn't say anything in this space, and I was one of them, and that felt wrong because it is such a life topic for me. Um, and so I felt unfinished about this still after the session. I was like, I need this too. I want this too. And I felt a little mad at the organizer, the facilitator, for closing this before everyone could go. Like I was just like, man, you know, some people went twice. You could just explicitly invite everyone who hadn't gone. It would take like 15, next 20 more minutes. Can we just do this? You know? So when the next mixed space, circle space came, I named this. I named that I had missed that session, that I needed this for myself as well, something like this, and that I was angry at the facilitator. And I was invited onto the mat with this because I was quite alive with it, and that felt scary because I was also in a state where I was like, well, I don't know what I want to say. I don't know if I can feel it now that the session is ended and the energy is there and I'm still in it, but I don't know if the group is anymore. And it feels weird to come up here and like if I just say like I know the topics or the words that I want to say, but if I just say them, they might not be there with the aliveness. They might not be connected to that emotion, and I don't want to come up here as also like as a man with my pain and fail to connect to it, fail to say what I need to say, and then just sort of like crawl back shamefully to my space outside of the mat in the group and be like, oh, I didn't really get to say it anyway. But I was encouraged to go onto the mat anyway, and once there, I first managed to say these things to the facilitator that I was mad at him, and he was like, "Well, see what needs to happen now." And then some women felt organically that they wanted to stand up for me. Like I wasn't sure if I even wanted to do another session exactly like that because it would have felt somewhat artificial to ask people like, "Hey, can we do that just one more time, just for me?" Like I know it was intense. I know we closed it off. I know it was an hour ago. Can we just do a redo? Like like encore. It would have felt weird. So not all the women came, but definitely some of them stood up for me and told me that they were available to listen to me. So in that sense, it mirrored my first anger session 3.5 years ago, where I got to really speak out a bunch of my anger at women. But where back then it had come out as grief only. This time it really came out as anger, and this was like the first time that I felt in my life I expressed anger at women. And that felt really great. It felt really good. I really needed that, Mary. Um, I, I just got to speak very honestly and powerfully about a bunch of those things that really mattered for me. And first, and without this sense of like having to have it make sense or having, of course, it wasn't related to these women. Of course, it wasn't. But it was just like from my emotions. So at first, I just felt into that emotion, and I don't remember exactly what I shouted out, like you're weak, you're cowards, you're unfucking worthy, all of these sort of things, just insults.
Yeah.
That felt right. And after that, I could get into my own stories about, the ways that I've been hurt, felt hurt by women in my life. And that was really good for me, and it felt very powerful. I had stripped down to my underwear, and I felt I really could show myself there in that nakedness. And a lot of the brothers in that space stood up for me, really like 8 or 9 or so, and supported me, stood at my back and physically were there for me, held my back, cried with me, sobbed with me, shook with me as I expressed it to the women. And at the end, I was just like, fuck you all. Like I'm so fucking done with women right now. Like, fuck this. So, and I just turned to my brothers and they really received me all like I want to say like a king. Like I expressed all of this. I had my courage, my power, and they were there for me. They felt it with me. They'd seen me, they'd held that space for me, and now they received me, celebrated me. And that felt so really so fucking good. I was just like, man, I don't need, like these women's opinions is like worthless to me. I got my brothers, I got myself, I got my own power. This is all that I need. Um, which I mean, of course, I was very grateful to these women. I thanked them afterwards individually, and I am grateful. I was at the moment also grateful, and that they would stand up for me to receive me, and that's very beautiful. And in the moment, it was right for me to just be like, fuck that. And just like, take my own space as a man. And yeah, long after I sat down, this man stayed in connection with me, touching my shoulders, touching my knees, as I said, which made me also feel very supported. Um, and it felt really good. that my pain isn't just my own, it's all men's, and that I can be allowed in that anger, um, and in that pain. Yeah.
That's wonderful. It seems like you needed a little more slowness in the original anger space, and
Yes.
like that's maybe those are things that are maybe not often combined, is like slowness with anger.
Yes, precisely. Yeah,
Yeah,
very astute.
I'm really glad. I'm really glad that you got the slowness that you needed to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you bring that up because I forgot to mention this was exactly what the facilitator told me afterwards. Like he said, like, hey, you were mad at me for not belonging in the space, but I hope you see now that what you needed didn't fit that space. You needed your own space where, yeah, more slowness indeed was allowed to you, where you could take some time to get into your body, to shout, to scream, to shake, to feel into what words you wanted to say before you could let that out. Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I think that next time I can probably do it in the moment, the anger session, but at the time, like a month ago, I definitely needed that extra spaciousness, slowness. Yeah, so I'm very grateful that I got to get that. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Mm. Mm.
Mhm.
Mm.
I know there were some things that you want to talk about. I don't want to rush them. do you do you want to um end it here and do those at another time?
I think so, yeah. This definitely wouldn't fit in 20 minutes, all that I want to say.
Yeah.
Um, yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of slowness, so we can pick this up and finish it, and we'll put it all together in one.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay, we're back.
All right. Um, I guess I'll jump right back in with your permission.
Yeah, please do.
Cool. I mentioned yesterday the space that I made for myself in the group. Also a gendered anger space. One thing that I completely forgot to mention was that for me it was, so I mentioned feeling like I needed to, like I might not know what kind of words to use or what I wanted to say, like, because there's a lot of stuff going on, but you might not always be able to emotionally connect with those things when you're in
Right.
the group and you're on the mat, this sort of thing. And it's valuable in this sort of work to not just try and talk dead words, so to speak. It's if you want something that emotionally resonates and is in some way healing, you got to do it from some place in you, in your heart, whatever that means, that feels alive to you, so that you can move in with it. And for me, I wasn't sure what that would be. So like I tried various angles and soon found out like, no, first I just need to like physicalize it, really let myself like this sort of roaring, like to kind of get into that frustration that I was feeling. And from there, I could feel like, oh, okay, now this wants to come out and now that wants to come out. So there's a lot of like, and this is like guided by the facilitator as well. Like he was like, okay, yeah, if you can find the words, try and see if you can make a sound or something.
Mm.
And it really underscores to me just how healing is very much a physical process. Like it involves not just your words, but all of your body. And what I found while I was, like talking out these things from my heart to these women, I also at certain points just had to like retch, like I had to almost vomit or something, which is generally a good sign
Yeah,
in these
yeah.
spaces. Like people have this whole story around like anger, where if you like keep it in and your voice gets quieter, and it's just like your throat gets blocked up, and as you allow yourself to let yourself out more to relax that self inhibition, so to speak, then it's like a retching kind of mechanism that often comes up for
Right.
people.
Yeah.
And in this case, that evening, I actually had to vomit really, really badly, like pretty badly. Like I vomited a few times in the past few years, and this was worse than
Uh,
any of them.
yeah.
Which probably not a coincidence, that had
Yeah.
happened.
Right.
Um, yeah, so which was nice. It was very satisfying to know that, like, okay, yeah, something definitely shifted in my body based on that. And if that wasn't enough confirmation, the last temple, the last space that I want to talk about, certainly did give me a lot of confirmation that things had changed in my body.
Mm.
The space that I want to talk about is what I call the party temple, because it was a temple space but also a party space. Um, a temple space, for those who are not familiar with it, is kind of let's say a play space, and a playful interaction space with sometimes elements of, or often there are elements of erotic energy,
Mm.
and there's also more of an energy of like either devotional or honoring or divine or transpersonal or ritualistic, kind of those sorts of themes and energies. In this case, it was not a sexual temple. Most temples, I would say, are, but this one was fully clothes on. Um, but yeah, it was kind of like a space where, like, at the end of the retreat, like on the last evening, we'd all moved through a whole bunch of stuff, and now it was time to really like inhabit our new selves and these new bonds that we had with people and see what wanted to happen. Um, um, yeah, I want to say up front, this may be a super interesting space to hear about, but it's more like it's for me to brag, it's for me to gloat, because I really enjoyed my own time in this space. Um, but basically, what it was that there was like a space in the middle for ecstatic dancing, and for those who
Mm.
are unaware, ecstatic dancing is completely sober dancing on bare feet and basically just moving however you like, however your body, whatever feels good in your body. Not trying to be like cool or whatever. Just move whatever the music tells you to do. And so there was an ecstatic dance space in the middle. There was a cuddle space with some, pillows and mattresses. There were two chairs that you could give and receive lap dances on. Um, there was like a mute eye gazing space, two mattresses for people to sit on and eye gaze.
Mhm.
There was two mattresses for requests, where you could make requests of the other person in terms of like touch
Mhm.
or energetic.
Mhm.
And finally, there were some mattresses for primal play. And primal play, I mentioned it earlier. We also had an entire evening of primal play. I sadly couldn't join in because I was still vomiting
Oh.
at this point. But yeah, which is too bad, because I really, really love primal play. Like it's one of my favorite modalities. But I had other things going on in my body.
Uh-huh. And
Primal play, yeah.
Mhm. Oh, I was just gonna ask what it is, because I associate that with kink, and I'm guessing this is not the same thing.
Mm. What is it in kink?
So there's like primal, like usually taking like a kind of predator and prey role. Um,
Oh,
so like kind of the more dominant person would sort of like chase down and catch the other one in a way, or
hmm.
engaging in whatever sexual things they might want to do.
Yeah, that sounds fun. No, this is quite different.
Okay.
No, this it's also called like ritual play, and it's less overtly sexual, although it can be. Primal play is basically like you and a stranger go on a mat together, and for 2, 5, or 7 minutes, however long the session takes, you you don't talk to each other. but you just follow the impulses of your body,
Mhm.
whatever those are. And that can be very varied. It's a little bit like circling, except it's more like this physical, direct, better version of circling.
Mhm.
Because circling, if you have an experience, right, you share it with the other person, but then you first have to feel into like, okay, what is that experience? How do I formulate it? What is the sentence going to be like? Then you have to talk through the whole sentence or multiple ones, and at that point,
Mhm.
the experience maybe has already changed.
Mhm.
Versus primal play, which is just directly like, what are you feeling? Then do it. Like, if there's a movement in your body that feels right, do it.
Oh,
If there's like a curiosity, or you want to play or poke the other person, or you want to like fight with them a little bit, or you just want to be more slow, more loving, whatever it is, you can just right away immediately make that interaction. And what I've personally found very great about primal play is that like there's a lot of layers of socialization, right, that people have, which tend to be on the verbal level. So if you're like sitting in front of another person, you're not physically interacting, you're just using words, then there's all this stuff that you're not going to feel into in your body because you sort of socialize not to within that context.
Mhm.
But suddenly when it comes to this sort of like animalistic play, a lot of those layers of socialization go away because they were never put onto a play space to begin with. Like the only socialization that you received for play was don't be super violent. And then once you grow a little older, just don't do it.
Right.
So once you lift that don't do it
Mhm.
angle, um, all of a sudden there's this full aliveness to feel into and discover,
Mhm.
which has been really great for me. Like I feel like play spaces like these were one of the earliest things that really resonated with me in terms of like these practices.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, which is like it's more of it's easier to get into than I would have expect from a practice like this. Um, and it is always just very surprising. Like I've had so many times where I, picked a person or was picked by a person to go into a mat, and I'd think beforehand like, okay, this is definitely gonna be this type of interaction, or like, okay, I'm gonna shoot for this sort of thing. And
Mhm.
then we got onto the mat, and the end is just completely different.
Oh.
Like when you're there, you get out of your stories, out of your head, and just feel into like what's actually alive here. And sometimes that can be a lot of different things. Even within 2 minutes, you can shift through, 5 or 6 qualitatively different types of interactions and types of connection with the same person. So
Mhm.
feels very fundamental, very strong, very direct, very juicy.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so I really like it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Um, so we had those play spaces, two play spaces like that. And then one play space that was available for an arbitrary amount of people rather than just pairs. Um, and these had some blindfolds, so people could be blindfolded, which
Cool.
is cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I had made friends with a wonderful Indian man who I also roomed with. I actually met him on my way to the retreat, and then I changed my room to be with him in the room because I was like, well, I gotta be with this guy, and that's completely the right decision because
Okay.
he was just like super, like beautiful, powerful, wise, kind, like really like I admire him a lot as a man. Like I feel like he's one of those men that really balances like the masculine and the feminine in a beautiful way.
Mm.
Um, which is like, yeah, kind of like I want to say like a ideal or something, or like a role model in some way.
Mm.
And we become friends. And um, for temple nights, generally you kind of dress up nicely, right? And I didn't know beforehand that there would be a temple night, so I didn't bring my temple clothing.
Oh.
Like I have a kimono here, and I didn't bring it. I had some other clothing, but as it happened, this friend of mine, he had a kimono himself, and he was already going to wear some other clothing.
Oh.
Um, So I just asked him like, hey, can I borrow that kimono? And he's like, absolutely. And this is I actually posted a picture of this kimono on Twitter because I think it's just a really fantastic look on me, and I feel really great in it. Like it's the best I've ever felt in a piece of clothing. And other people loved it too. Like already when I entered the space, there was one friend. She said like, "Oh, like when you enter the space in this kimono, at this flash of like, oh, he's gonna be the entertainment for tonight. Like this is, this is what the event is gonna be. Like, it's gonna do something." Um, yeah, and just a lot of people remarked on it positively, and that was really great. So like in general, like for instance, we started with just ecstatic dancing in that space, and ecstatic dancing and me have gone through a whole journey where like a year ago, as recently as that, it didn't feel very good to me. I can partner dance a lot, like I partner dance for 3 years, but there's like I know discreetly the steps that I can take that I have as options, and it's improvise in terms of what steps do I choose, but not improvise in terms of how do I move my body. Yeah.
Right.
Versus ecstatic dance, which is really like there's no guidelines, no guidance at all. You just gotta feel into it. And that's tough for someone who, if you're not very with your own body,
Right.
and if that doesn't feel like comfortable to move. So even a year ago, it felt not good for me to ecstatic dance. Like it just didn't feel good. So, even at some events where they threw ecstatic dance at me, I would just stop doing it. But at this event, at this temple now, after the week and what we've been through, I felt just so free in my body, and I really got into the dancing and just really, really enjoyed dancing and moving my body for, I don't want to say the first time in my life, but like definitely the first time that it felt so natural and confident and good and felt playful and sexy, and it worked out really well, and I danced with a lot of people. Yeah, so that was great, and the entire evening was such a big success for me in a lot of ways. Like I just went up to people and took them to like the request zone or to the cuddle space, like the play space. And at one point, like my that Indian friend who granted me the kimono, he sat down on the chair, and I was right there as it happened, and I saw him sit down, and I was like, okay, we're doing this, like, and then I and another woman gave him like a lap dance, which is really great. which like a second before I started doing it, I had no idea that I would do that. But like it happened, and then I was like, oh, that's totally the vibe. Let's fucking do it, and it was great. Yeah, and at one point I went to the big play space area and just blindfolded myself and sat down. And normally there's this fear of like, okay, you can like of not being approached or not having people come to you. And I just sort of sitting there blindfolding yourself and then just being there for a long time. But in this case, like very soon, people came to me, and in total, I think 4 people played with me while I was blindfolded in that space, which was great because I also didn't know what was going to happen. I was just like kind of feel into what kind of touch I was receiving and just surrendering to that. And that felt really great. So I felt like I both really moved into like an agentic, like dancing with women, with men, asked them onto these intimacy contexts. So that agentic part worked out really well, but also the surrendering part I really fell into. I know that also worked fantastically.
Yeah.
So it was sort of like one of the best evenings of my life. Like I felt so amazing the whole time. Like I really, really enjoyed it.
Wow. And with the blindfold thing, is it like, do people kind of ask and get consent before touching, or is it like the kind of rules of the space are like you put your blindfold on and you surrender to whatever?
It is place-based rules. So the form of consent that you work with is non-verbal. If you don't want something to happen, you really don't like it, you step off the mat. And then the other person cannot reach out to you, cannot touch you.
Right.
Yep.
Cool.
Of course, if you really don't like something, you can absolutely yell it out. Like no
Sure.
one's gonna.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's sort of the intention.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was really lovely. There's like sort of like half temple vibes, half party
Mhm.
vibes, with like
Yeah.
live music first by the musicians, and then later just some party music.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a really nice way to kind of cap it all off,
Mhm.
for me. Yeah. And that's something that I also sort of taken home, which is like that love for dancing, for moving my body, for inhabiting it. Like I just found that I impromptu dance in my life, like sometime in my room, and I'm like, oh, I want to dance right now. So I just put on a song and go for it.
Mhm.
And I really, really enjoy it. And I gone to like ecstatic dance evening as well. I want to do more of that too. So I really feel like this sort of new modality has opened up for my body, which is such a wonderful, fun modality. And I really enjoy
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. So that was kind of the main spaces
Mhm.
that we had.
Sounds like
Um,
just so many like closely, and I know you said there was other stuff in between, but like in a week, even to have that many things, like there's a lot. Like each of those is so intense. Like it would bring up so much stuff, and then like there would be a lot of inner stuff going on, I would think, in between.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And like I did so much like of these sort of glue events that I didn't really mention. Like I
Mhm.
referred to them a little before, but we had things like the dance of yes, like a sort of consent exercise where you pair up with people and you kind of move together at a distance that feels right for you,
Mhm.
and you experiment with like closeness and distance to see where does it feel good to you to be with this person.
Mhm.
Um, we had like a lot of dancing where you just like sort of exact dance together with other people. I did a lot of like
Mhm.
like dancing with your backs to the other person and like going low,
Mhm.
or just playfully like dancing with each other, like a lot of this sort of stuff as well. There was an entire impromptu womb space that
Mhm.
happened, which was very mystical. It just sort of
Mhm.
organically occurred in the group,
Oh.
in everyone. And when I say womb space, I mean also the ethereal womb of men, so to speak.
Mhm.
Um, where just like people really resonated with that as a theme, that as an area of the body, that as a feeling.
Mhm.
And we all just kind of went onto the mat and kind of just noised it out, whatever
Wow.
that was, cried it
Uh-huh.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one
Huh.
really knows what happened there or what it
Wow.
meant, but it's sort of like this space that sort of happened in the group,
Uh-huh.
and we all just went along with it.
Oh, that's
And it's
amazing.
just, yeah, and I still have no clue what that meant, but it
Mhm.
was still really great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. Plus, like some other people sessions, like so much happened. It's just really,
Mhm.
really a very full week.
Mhm.
Um, which is just great. Like it's fantastic. I really love that. I did notice on the sixth day already that I was just fully satiated. Like I was full.
Mhm.
I couldn't fit more into it. So there
Right.
was like a few things that happened. There was a kind of a brotherhood initiation experience where in the men's group for one of the men,
Mhm.
he wanted to feel kind of included, initiated into the brotherhood,
Mm.
into manhood, into some sense of like being his own person now and being powerful and being supported by the men. So we made an entire ritual for him.
Oh, wow.
The One of the musicians, he went to his van and actually got a sea conch, or like a huge
Mhm.
shell
Yeah.
to blow through,
Mhm.
which created this like primal.
Yeah.
sounds. And he also mentioned like, yeah, this could be like one of the first, genuine instruments that we've ever had
Mhm.
in the history of humanity. And I think it was also used as like a bell instrument because it's such a loud and fierce sound,
Wow.
So to use this instrument to like bless someone into masculinity, I mean, it's just like a whole ritual thing. It was
Mhm.
pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so there's like a lot of stuff that I didn't even won't get to, but
Yeah.
it was still really great.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I also want to mention is maybe because I've mentioned my own experience to start this space, right? And um, yeah, I will mention more about kind of my overall journey soon, but I want to mention a few things that went on for other people as well. So there was one thing where there's like a slight phenomenon of some people basically having like self-reinforcing negative patterns.
Mhm.
So one example of this is there was a man who would speak a lot and kind of always lose attunement with the group, with the field, whenever he'd speak, because he would just go on and keep going on tangents and not really have like a clear point or a clear direction. He just would lose people.
Mhm.
And he noticed this himself. And also, I think in his relationship, he mentioned like this happens all the time, like I lose the attention of people.
Mhm.
And the way that he reacts to that kind of trigger is to try and take up more space, to talk
Sure.
more,
Yeah.
to do this even more strongly,
Mhm.
which was, it's of course like a self-reinforcing thing. Like the more you do this,
Right.
the more people disconnect,
Mhm.
because you are more disconnected from other people as well. Um, which was, that's already kind of a tragic pattern for a person to
Mhm.
have.
Yeah.
Um, and then the question is like, so for him, what healing looks like is to heal this pattern, right?
Mhm.
As part of it. But then like, how do you facilitate that? How do you give that to a person? Because what it is, what it sounds like, and what it sort of lands as is sort of like, dude, you gotta shut up. You gotta really stop talking and feel into how people are already feeling you,
Mhm.
which is difficult to receive. It's difficult to
Yeah.
say. It's difficult to,
Mhm.
even if you accept it, to adopt it as like a new strategy.
Mhm.
Um, but it was something that worked in this space. Like and I don't know a lot of spaces where you could say this sort of thing to a person and have it be received positively
Right.
and have
Yeah.
and not just positively in terms of like, oh, I accept that you are giving me advice and are trying to help me, but
Mhm.
positive in the sense of, oh, I see that this
Mhm.
is going on, that this is correct.
Right.
Um, like that requires a lot of respect and trust for the person saying this, that like, oh, I that you kind of let them put their worldview on top of yours and
Mhm.
trust that it is fine, even though the direct result of it is that you have to kind of stop talking.
Yeah.
So
That's like I know like kind of how painful it can be to like consistently feel like people are not interested in what you have to say because we a lot of time a lot of us grow up without that like kind of connection to our nonverbal selves and the ability to connect to people on that level, and the only thing we have is words. But then when people are kind of rejecting you when you're trying to use words to communicate with them, like it I can totally understand where he's coming from. And I think fortunately for me, my response when people were like, I don't want to hear about your day, or like, go away, or you're annoying, or whatever, my response was like to stop talking, which I think was, and sometimes like just stop and not start again, which I think has its own problems. But
Yeah.
I can understand, like, just like if I just do it a little more, a little better, maybe I can make that connection. And like, it is a really hard pattern to break, like trusting that you can make the connection on a nonverbal level when you're not comfortable on that level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's sort of like this balance of these spaces where like you want to, especially in like a masculinity and femininity spaces, right? Like you want to help people with their agenthood, with their power, with their ability to take charge and take control of things.
Yeah.
And you want to also foster the ability to surrender, to give up that control.
Yeah.
Both of those things. And there's a lot of spaces that only go for one or the other. Like I would say that like classical, like non-healing spaces tend to go for the active agent kind of
Yeah.
style.
Yeah.
But most healing spaces tend to just go for the surrendering style. And it's nice to have like both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this seems like a very well balanced event. Like they were kind of coming at things from a lot of different angles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. This is actually one of the main themes of both this event and also of Easter, was something like it's easy to go to a healing space and kind of be like, all right, I'm here, I paid the money, now heal me.
Right.
They're gonna show up like that. which is not, it's not how it works. And like in a lot of cases you still have to do it yourself, and because that core ability to do it yourself is what constitutes healing for a lot of people. But in the end, like you can be given space for this, you can be given encouragement for this, but no one's gonna sit there and wait for like an hour for you to figure this out for yourself, because everyone has their own stuff going on. They want to also work with that sort of thing. So you have to be able to plug yourself into the space, so to speak.
Right.
And there's also a sense of like, if you were given this space explicitly by people, you wouldn't go through the process of doing it yourself, of claiming that space for yourself.
Oh, right.
So as a facilitator, and he kind of made that choice quite clearly, which is like he's not gonna keep too much track of what's going on with who, and ensure that like, oh, they need to be taken care of, like he does that a little bit, but like first of all it gets way overwhelming if you have to do that for an entire space, and second of all it's like he's not your daddy, which is like, and it's very easy to say like this to relate to these people. It's like, oh, you're like the wise, father or mother, person. No, that also sucks for this guy, for these people, these facilitators. Like they don't want that.
Yeah.
And it teaches you the wrong thing. Like it teaches you to heal in a parent-child context, which is, that's its own whole thing. But what you want is to be able to heal in an equal context and kind of get to that place. So for me, like I mentioned in my space, like, yeah, like I'm angry at you, for the facilitator, for not giving me the space. And he was like, well, now you claimed it, which is great. This is precisely what we wanted from you.
Right.
Which is completely correct, of course. It's, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just wanted to kind of name that as an angle here. And on the topic of, patterns that people get stuck in, there was one person here who really related to the lead facilitator as a sort of father figure, and really kind of blamed the facilitator for like not taking good care of him. Whereas from the facilitator's side, and not taking care of it, I mean that in the active sense, you know, like this guy was obviously going through some stuff, and then the facilitator might have seen that in a few instances, but didn't like actively invite him into the space.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy felt worse and worse because of that. And meanwhile, from the facilitator's angle, it was much more like, well, I'm waiting for you to bring this up, you know,
Right.
for it to get to the point where you need to bring it up.
Mhm.
And indeed that happened.
Mhm.
And this in general, I don't want to go too much into this space, but there was a very difficult self-fulfilling narrative in this person of other people will betray me, other people won't support me.
Mhm.
And so there were ways in which he kept this story alive for himself and really interpreted things in a way that matched that story. You know, like in this case, like the facilitator was absolutely there to facilitate him, but all that he could see was, you're not there for me, you're not there for me.
Right. Like you're not there for me specifically as a special individual like that.
Well, more like I'm going through some stuff and you aren't picking up on it, or you
Yeah.
aren't helping me out here. Like you see me
Right.
in suffering and you're not giving
Yeah.
me, you know, like a lifeline.
Right.
But this feeling would remain consistent, like even after this had been raised, and indeed, like the space was
Mhm.
his, you know,
Yeah.
and this was really difficult because there was his stories or narratives about how other people, you know, disliked him. They were always kind of plausible,
Mhm.
but I wouldn't say true.
Mhm.
Like, for instance, he talked a lot about these feelings, but from a kind of what seemed like a disconnected place, you know, kind of like just intellectually describing the feelings or describing what he was noticing versus being with that pain and expressing that pain. And this went
Mhm.
on for like 20 minutes.
Oh,
So a lot of people got incredibly agitated.
right.
Um, and um, he, at some point, eventually, finally went onto the mat, you know, after 20 minutes of like build up for this. And at
Uh-huh.
that point, everyone was like, finally, like, we're finally going to move with it. We're finally,
Mhm.
you know, gonna get some sort of like commitment from this guy to come alive with it. So we all kind of like applauded and cheered for him to get onto the space, like, fuck yeah, he's finally doing it. And then the facilitator asked, like, okay, what was that like for you? And the guy was like, well, you know, I feel very unsafe. Like it feels like yeah, he just felt like this sort of unsafety from the group in that, even though we were applauding him and cheering him,
Mhm.
where of course there is like a negative effect in that, where we were frustrated with his taking so long to get there. But at the same time, we were also very happy to see him finally get
Yeah.
here, you know.
Yeah.
And you can really take that both ways.
Mhm.
And the real truth is that both are kind of true. Like we were frustrated with him and we were here for him. And what we wanted was for him to let us help him, you know.
Sure.
But the main thing that he saw was, oh, these people are frustrated with me. See, they hate me, like this sort of thing.
Mhm.
So it was really difficult. And eventually, like through a lot of like finding the right guidance, finding the right things for him to do, he also moved through a lot of his stuff. And
Mm.
I wouldn't say it was like fully healed, but he definitely did get to points where it's sort of like, oh, I noticed that my narrative and external reality are so disjunct from each other, so disjoint,
Mhm.
um, that he was also kind of got to a confusion that I think eventually turned out really or quite well for him.
Okay.
Yeah. But it
Yeah.
was a very difficult space, also for the facilitator, because it sort of seemed like everything that he tried to do or say landed in a negative way. And
Mhm.
honestly, one of the most difficult things I've seen, one of the most difficult emotional situations I've seen in my life,
Mhm.
And I'm really impressed by how the facilitator handled this, because he at some point was also kind of setting his own boundaries of like, I don't like, we just went through a really strong, intense session with the entire group, and now you're coming in here with this, and I see that you need space, but the group needs a break. Like, we really need a
Right.
break, And
Yeah.
then the guy kind of talked about it more, which made sense because he was in total distress.
Yeah.
And the facilitator could see that, the group could see that, but we all were not ready to hold him. So it
Mhm.
just would have not made any sense to make that space for him at that time.
Right.
And the facilitator had the really difficult task of telling someone in deep distress who felt precisely that he had been ignored multiple
Mhm.
times by the facilitator, to tell this guy, we're going to take a break. We're not going to do your stuff.
Yeah.
Do your thing another time. Bring it to the
Mhm.
space the next time. It's
Yeah.
not the space for it right now, which is really difficult. And I really respect him for the way that he brought that.
Yeah. Yeah. That
You
sounds
know,
like a really hard situation, and definitely like when people are stuck in a negative mindset, like you can't. I'm a helper, so I spent years with like family members and people who are like stuck in this negativity, and like if I could just I can help, let me help, like I'll and at a certain point you realize there isn't anything you can do until they decide to step out of that, like, and it sounds like there was some of that going on there.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, some other examples of what was going on in the space was that for example, there was this one woman who kind of had, how do I say it? She felt she had a very general distantness, in my opinion, was my view. Um, and she herself also mentioned a few times during various events that, yeah, she didn't really feel like she had to sort of like be able to connect to whatever was going on inside of her, and she felt it like as a very life general thing for her. Like, all the time she wasn't so connected to her own aliveness, her own sense of what she wanted, her own sense of rightness. And she so for instance, like when it came to things like the intergender anger space,
Hmm.
many people said words, but if I remember correctly, I think she just screamed, and tried to kind of connect with whatever pain or emotion she held.
Hmm.
Which she later mentioned, like, yeah, sometimes was a little not quite out of the feeling of it, but sometimes actually it connected a bit. So for her, the journey was really like, how do I get to that aliveness and
Yeah.
feel into that and let myself express that? And well, I don't know any more about how that went for her, but I do think I saw some progress in that throughout the week. Um, I'm just seeing her in the space, seeing various interactions. And there were some other people, like this one woman um, who came in to the retreat seeming quite like demure and quiet, like shy. And at the end, she was doing like a session where she just like, I don't even remember what she did, but I do remember that was just like she was there in like a really full power, like a really like a loudness, but also like a
Mhm.
physical loudness. It's like yes, you get to be there,
Mhm.
like yeah. Um, just really kind of just like a 180 switch from where she'd been before, from like
Mhm.
demure and quiet to
Yeah.
really present, really we see her, as like a very like a full person versus like, oh, who are you? Um, yeah, which was also quite beautiful to see. Um, there was in general, I mentioned a few times kind of this attunement to the group as a theme. Like the man who kept talking even though he'd lost the connection with the group, or the man who was in such distress, wasn't ready to receive him at that point because we've been through some intense things. And this was really like a big learning journey for everyone, was to attune to the group and to how the group is feeling, so as to facilitate that healing in the group, which was kind of the main intention of the entire thing. And this was really quite amazing. So first of all, I think what helped was doing those things like the judgment exercise that I mentioned, where you get your own judgments out of the way and you get your own stuff out of the way. And the more and more that people got their own stuff out of the way, you know, they kind of opened up to the group, like in being heard and in feeling witnessed and heard. People get like an openness. People get like a spaciousness around receiving the group and feeding into, like, okay, I've had, you know, like the thing that I needed the whole time, that I've been needing my whole life, has been given to me. So now I can relax and, yeah, actually feel what's going on around me, you know, which was very beautiful to see. And once we got into that kind of group attunement, it was wild, the kind of things that happened within the group, like that womb space. Like, what was that? No one knows, you know, but it emerged totally from the group, which is a wild thing to emerge. Like, you know, we just sat down in that circle and we were like, okay, what's the life in a group, you know? And everyone's sort of like, yeah, we need this sort of thing. Like, we couldn't even name it, but like whatever it was, you know, we all felt it. Or and this is kind of like the flip side of attunement, which is something like, to put it into rhyme form, what you don't reveal, others feel. So what you're too scared or ashamed to feel, to show other people, you're making other people pick up for you. You're making them kind of bear it for you. Or like, I don't want to say making them, because, you know, it's not, I don't want to put guilt there, but it is like other people will feel it a lot of the time. Like, imagine if you're with someone who's got a lot of shame about themselves, you know, like if you're with them, especially if they're repressing that, then you'll feel that shame that they feel about themselves quite strongly. Or at least I know I do, and I know that a lot of other people do, and I figure that you do too.
Yeah, I feel like that happens with me as well. Yeah, and sometimes I'm not sure what's going on, and but yeah, that that definitely resonates with me.
Versus like a sense of, if they could be sort of honest about it, then they're bearing it, and you don't have to anymore.
Yeah.
Like there's some sort of energetic law or something about interpersonal context that I feel like I really got to see in action during this retreat, as people started picking up the things that other people have been picking up for them.
Yeah.
So, for example, I mentioned this man who had been feeling such distrust towards, you know, the facilitator and towards the group, and was not speaking from his own aliveness. And while he was calm, he was just sitting. Slowly, the entire group got physically crazy. We got like, we felt like violence in our bodies, like anger, like people stood up, people sort of like half punching the walls, people sort of just like moving their body, like trying to move that energy out there, because we all felt such a kind of like almost a violent anger in this man that he was completely repressing. And it was so strong. We were all like, "Oh, like get it out there." God, you know, like this sort of thing where, and that might sound like threatening or something. I wouldn't say it was necessarily that, but it was sort of like we were all kind of processing it for ourselves. because we were feeling it so strongly. And it's like, this isn't just a normal thing for a group to feel, you know.
Right.
It
Yeah.
didn't happen at any other point that we were
Mhm.
feeling this exact emotion so strongly, all of us. Like, it was really about this person and how we were resonating with it and how we were picking up on it.
Mhm.
And it just seems like such a strong principle, and such a great gift that you can give to other people as well. Like, if you allow those feelings in, if you allow yourself to feel these things,
Mhm.
then other people can relax,
Yeah.
you know. And there's often, sorry.
Oh, I just that's kind of bringing up for me like a so one thing that we talk about a lot in my Codependence Anonymous meetings is like you're not responsible for other people's emotions. And so, you know, one of the codependent patterns is trying to manage other people's emotions, which is a thing that I always have done a lot of. But like at the same time, it's like I'm like those emotions are affecting me, and like, you know, and I like one of my emotional management techniques is like asking people like, how are you? Like, and it's almost like an obsessive thing, and not so much anymore, but when I was younger, when I would ask, how are you? It's like, I want to find out what I'm dealing with here. Like, you know, what do I need to manage? And yeah, so it's like, I'm wondering like about this, like balance, like with the group, like, you know, his emotions are not your responsibility to manage, but at the same time, like, if you guys are all being present and authentic and everything, like you're picking up on that, and it's affecting you, and it's more of a communal thing than an individual thing. And I'm wondering, like, I don't know, what's your take on that, like having been in these spaces where people are picking up on this kind of energy.
In terms of like responsibility, or in terms of how do
Yeah.
you deal with the group
Yeah,
feeling so active, or
kind of like responsibility, like whose job is it? Like clearly it's his job to deal with it, but also like it's not, if everyone else is being affected by it, then in order to, I guess, I don't know, have agency, like it makes sense, I think, to take some initiative and be like, what can we do to like settle this down and process it and stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, um, hmm. So definitely, I think that, like, so in this case, you know, the guy eventually went on the med, expressed his violence, and immediately that energy in the group dissipated as we just were like, he's picking it up. We don't have to do it anymore. Perfect. You know, so that went really well. And there wasn't ever, I think, an occurrence in where the group was feeling something that wasn't eventually picked up by the person, you know, because the whole point of this was like every time the exercise was solely, what is alive in you? Try to
Yeah.
explore that, unearth that, and generally that worked. If there had been a case where it really didn't work, then I figure it would be up to the people, you know, feeling that strong emotion to find a way to deal with it yourself. So like if we had been stuck with this violence, you know, go punch a wall, go do some push-ups, whatever it is that you need to do to get that energy out of your body, because it's not yours, so it will leave your body so long as you let it out, you know, physically. If you just sit with it and let it stay within you, then I mentioned that's where things, you know, could go wrong, in the sense of like you just stay stuck with it.
Yeah.
And as far as I mean, there wasn't ever any sort of mention of responsibility, and I don't think there was a little bit of framing at all that was present during any of this work, because like obviously like it's just people reacting, and like, you know, you can't just tell someone like, please feel this so that we can drop it, you know, like that's not how it works either.
Can't do it on somebody else's schedule.
Yeah, of course. Which, I mean, you know that, of course. So and in general, I also want to say, like, And this is kind of one of the core insights of a lot of this stuff, which is sort of like a lot of us have this sense of, oh, strong emotions are dangerous. Like strong emotions can hurt people, can be a
Right.
lot for people to deal with. It's difficult. And for me, in a space like this, kind of the opposite is true, which is sort of like, no, like repressing those strong emotions, that is difficult to be around.
Mm-hmm.
The strong emotions themselves, yeah, they can make for an intense experience. But those are all things that can be moved through. Even the
Right.
intergender anger space, which was so intense.
Yeah.
The vast majority of us were able to let that move through our bodies and have it be out there again.
Right.
Like as long as these emotions are in flow, if they're in flow in you, they can be in flow through us, even if they hit us, even if they enter us. And so that's sort of like this healthy process of like where no matter kind of how intense it gets, like it can get really fucking intense. And it's still completely okay because it's just how it works. It's just like a natural flow of this thing. It feels right the whole time through. It
Yeah.
feels true, it feels connected, it feels authentic, it feels alive. There's nothing that feels wrong about it. Like intensity on its own is not a bad thing at all.
Right.
Or at least doesn't have to be, right? Yeah. And I think that really surprises me. It's just like how simple of a process this can be, and how non-damaging and non-effortful this process is for other people when someone is expressing a strong emotion. So long as you do kind of let it out, so long as you do kind of seek out that aliveness, like what tends to not work is if you do it the way that, like, for instance, that white man in the race space did, where you try to disclaim yourself the whole time. You never talk from that feeling. Then you can keep talking for hours, and other people will keep feeling that thing that you're repressing.
Yeah.
And then it is worse than just having a regular conversation. But if you let that stuff out, if you have that courage and vulnerability, and of course that sense of safety, which is also very important, but it is also courage in the end. If you can let it out, then beautiful things can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. Yeah, and I guess my way of dealing with it is when, if I'm hanging out with someone, I try to open up, like make the space safe for them to talk if they want to, and they don't have to, but like if I give them the opportunity to talk, then we can get it out and it's great. And if and there are definitely times when they're like, no, it's fine, nothing, and that's fine, that's their thing. But eventually, if it is something intense that's going on with them, a lot of times I have to kind of get some physical distance, and
yeah absolutely. And I resonate with that a lot, like this. Being friendships in my life where I took some distance because it's like I can't hold this stuff. And I also find it difficult to set those not necessarily interpersonal boundaries, but just energetically for myself to no longer feel that, yeah, which has been kind of an ongoing thing for me, which is like I mean, it always sounds kind of self-serving to say like, oh, I feel a lot, like I'm a really sensitive person, but like I think I am.
Yeah.
And that makes me sometimes do these insensitive things, like taking that distance, or especially in the past, I feel like I've lashed out at people a few times. I mean, this is like more like when I was like a teenager or something, because I didn't know how to deal with all the stuff that I was feeling also in other people. And I mean, teenager, I was also feeling a lot of stuff myself. I don't. This isn't just their stuff. But I've always kind of related to that sort of attunement or that sensitivity as like, I want to say like weakness is a strong word, but that's like a disadvantage because it makes a lot of things difficult in terms of interactions.
Yeah.
And that's something that I found really, really inspiring and beautiful in this retreat, which was that basically this lead facilitator has made a career and a beautifully healing
Mhm.
series of spaces out of his attunement
Yeah.
to other people, because that's all that he sort of, I mean, he's okay, he does a lot of other stuff, right? Like organizational, structural,
Yeah.
this isn't all he does. But but like the moment to moment, the work itself, this is what he does. He's
Yeah.
just being attuned to people more strongly than I've ever seen anyone be attuned to people.
Mhm.
And I want to say, like, seeing him in action and seeing him handle other people's emotions in this way is I feel like I've never seen anyone be as skilled as anything as I've seen him be skilled at emotional attunement,
Mm.
which is an incredible thing to be skilled at. Like it's magical. It's, yeah, really inspiring. Like I feel like I've never had like a really like a role model until
Mhm.
I saw this guy in action and saw what he can do. Like it's so good for people, and it is so like so fully in his own integrity, the way that he feels these things and channels other people's energies.
Mm.
Yeah, which I think is very beautiful.
Mhm. It's this is a I don't know. It's on a certain level it sounds like kind of a silly parallel, but
No, go for it.
I feel like it is kind of a similar thing. Like I don't know if you've ever watched like what Caesar Milan does with dogs, the dog whisperer.
No.
Oh, he the show is like a reality show, whatever dog training thing, but he's kind of like rehabilitating, sort of energetically rehabilitating dogs that are like
Mm.
aggressive or fearful or something like that. And a lot of what he does is he uses like packs of dogs. So he has like a large pack of like 30 dogs at any given time that are well-adjusted dogs, and like he can bring
Mm.
these other aggressive dogs in, and they pick up on the other dog's energy and on his energy, and it like heals them, and
Oh,
and then they and there's a lot more to it than that, but like they're able to kind of go home and be well-adjusted dogs, and
that's beautiful.
yeah, and I feel like there is this, I don't know, people have this like wall against like comparing ourselves to like actual animals and stuff like that, but like this is sort of tapping into our animal nature. Like we have this, we're social creatures, and we attune to others just like animals, because we're animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's beautiful. That's a wonderful one. The dog whisperer. I'll look it up.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to say that this retreat was like the human version of that, because we didn't come all well adjusted, but it still
Mhm,
worked out really well.
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of those dogs um are not have not always been well adjusted.
For
They're
sure.
well
Yeah.
adjusted in the pack. But yeah.
Yeah, but like I mentioned that, yeah, when that dog comes into that pack, then
Hmm.
they're already very well adjusted.
Yeah.
That would be cool. I'd love to experience that as a person sometime, just enter like a group of people who are all doing great.
Yeah, I know.